Missing 411, David Paulides, books about unsolved missing people. We're going to look into this mystery coming up next on Deceptions of the Ages News. Hello everybody and welcome to Deceptions of the Ages News. We are going to look into the missing 411 cases, but before we do, we need to do a little business with some of our new subscribers. We want to say hello to Joe Bob 5586. We also want to say hello to Sapini Tio. And as well, we want to say hello to Deborah Allen, and we can't forget Drayton Cannon. Welcome to the Deceptions of the Ages News family. All right, and also if you haven't subscribed, please do so and consider a sponsorship at patreon.com/hindsight. All right, Missing 411. If you haven't heard about this, then you must look up David Paulides' book or books called Missing 411, and then they have various titles because there are so many people that have gone missing. And the problem with David Paulides' books that we're going to talk about today is that David Paulides, being an ex-policeman, is a very credible person, and he does never in his books try to explain what happens to these people. It's all about what happened, and it's never about why it happened or how it happened. So it's just strictly the objective police report, whatever, and maybe some notes from the parents. So if you haven't looked into these books, I encourage you to. Now, why are we talking about David Paulides' 411 books? Well, the first reason is because this is a channel that deals with deceptions of extraterrestrials, Latter-day Saints or Mormons, and Freemasons. So we're going to leave it up to you towards the end of the video to decide who might be responsible for what is happening in our national forests and just with these missing people in general. Okay, so the second reason that I want to that I'm talking about Missing 411 is because I keep contacting David Paulides and he doesn't respond to my emails, but I want him to come on my show, Books in Hindsight. So David Paulides, if you happen to see this, I hope you'll consider getting onto my podcast, Books in Hindsight. All right, so let's go into a little bit more about what David Paulides is doing. Now, he is going around and he's compiling evidence based on the fact that people he found out were disappearing in the national parks, and the national parks would not investigate it beyond the initial investigation because it was not, as he points out many times, a criminal investigation. These are all missing persons cases. Okay, so people just automatically disappear. So the first thing that Mr. Paulides does was, or did in his books, is he compiles certain kinds of cases. Now, he rules out any case that might be explained by a predator. He also rules out, where there's a lot of crime, like as he points out, Texas and Florida doesn't even really take cases from there. Now, there are also some things that make all of these cases similar in the victims, in that when they are found, they like don't have their shoes, but their feet are not cut, but they've managed to travel great distances over short periods of time before they were found. Or some are found alive, which we'll talk about, but most of them, the remains are found. But there's no explanation as to how these people disappeared, and a lot of times they disappear because they're either the first person or the last person in a column of hikers, or they're out by themselves, and they all seem to match a certain age and other characteristics. So all of these things, if they match these characteristics, they end up in one of David Paulides' 411 books. All right, so today we're going to talk about 3 cases and a couple of outside things that I think go the farthest way towards explaining this 411 mystery. Now, I'm not going to say that this is a one-size-fits-all for everything, but I am going to try to bring some things together so that, which is what we do at Deceptions of the Ages News, we take seemingly unrelated events and try to make sense out of them by bringing them together. Well, that's what we're going to do today. And the first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to talk about 3 particular missing person cases. So let's talk about that first. The first thing that we want to talk about is we want to talk about not people that have been found dead, but we want to find out what happened to people that were found alive. So these videos are all over YouTube. They've been posted and reposted, and so it wouldn't be necessary for me to even put one channel on there, because you can see these on many channels. Now, the first case we want to look at is what I call the Bear Man story, and probably what's the same thing everybody else calls it. Now, in this case, there was a young girl and her brother, and they were picking berries. And this is another thing David Paulides says is common to these disappearances, is berry bushes. They were picking berries, and the girl and her brother just disappeared. So they called out the searchers, and they searched and searched. According to the story, they found the sister, the girl. And they asked, "What happened to you, and where is your brother?" And she said, "The Bear Man took him." And she said that the Bear Man offered her berries to be quiet, and he said he just wanted to play with her brother. And then her brother disappeared, and she reappeared later. So a Bear Man, okay? Now I want you to just remember that as one piece of evidence, because she said he had long hair like a bear, but he had a funny face like a man. So she called him a Bear Man, and he also stood up upright. So that is one case that we want to look at. The second case we want to look at is a case that happened in Kentucky, I believe, and it was in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, according to David Paulides. And it was the Martin boy, and it's a very famous case. And there's a couple reasons that it is important for our story. The first reason is that when this Martin boy disappeared, they called out the search and rescue people and all that, and sometime later, people that were at the park at the same time said they saw what they thought was a bear. It had something over its shoulder. Now, remember the first case? The girl's brother was over this thing's shoulder, all right? But they said they thought they saw like a bear or something, and it had something over its shoulder, and there was a horrible scream. All right, so we have 2 cases where there's some kind of bear-like man creature, and 2 cases where it's something sitting on a shoulder and being carried away. Now, there's one case that is not really part of this, but what I want to throw in there just for a second, and that is the abduction of a young boy and I believe it was somewhere out in California, and he said that his robot grandma had come and gotten him, and she was in a room or a cave with a bunch of robots, and she wanted him to poop on a piece of paper. Now, this is a very amazing story, but I just throw it in there because I want people to understand that there's no Bigfoot or bear man in this abduction case. It seems to be done by something with some kind of technology. All right, but this boy returned and he was able to tell this story to his parents and everybody else. So the last case that I want to talk about is, and this is where we really start to get into some of our bigger mystery apparatus. And this case, it has to do with a famous case of a girl. I think her name was Shelly and this is the one that basically inspired David Paulides to get so involved with these missing persons cases. And this is a young girl who disappeared after a horseback riding episode. They were up in the Yosemite National Park. Now, the key here is that the girl had a camera with her, and she went to take a picture, disappeared, and all I found was the lens of the camera. Many of these people have cameras with them when they disappear. Now, there are cases of Bigfoot hunters where they put the cameras on the trail, but the Bigfoot thing seems to know what the camera is, and they don't go in it, or they destroy the tree that the camera is on. So they seem to be aware of the cameras for some reason, and maybe or maybe not that attracts them. All right, so she disappeared in Yosemite, and the reason that this caught David Paulides' eye so much is that a number of things happened that will not happen in any other part of the United States. After David Paulides filed his Freedom of Information Act request, he got a call from a lawyer, from the government, not from the Park Service, but from a lawyer for the government who told him that he would never see any documentation, any records, anything from Yosemite National Park, and definitely he would not see anything from this missing girl case. So in spite of violating his rights by asking him why he even wanted them, there is something that is very unique about Yosemite National Park. Now, what could that be? Well, the first thing that is unique about Yosemite National Park is that is where the majority, I won't say the majority, but most of the missing person cases happen. Yosemite National Park. So what is so unique about Yosemite National Park? Well, let's look at a group called the Bohemian Grove Group. And that is a bunch of people, politicians, wealthy elites, businessmen who gather in Northern California to do some kind of private rituals which nobody is allowed to see. And if you get too close to them, I guess you will suffer some kind of physical or bodily harm. But that is one group that we need to take a look at. A bunch of wealthy politicians who would be able to manipulate information and keep information from flowing via Freedom of Information Act requests to the public. All right, so there you have a power structure, but is there another power structure? Well, absolutely there is, and that power structure is no farther away than down in Los Angeles and Hollywood, California. Now, we don't need a big long lecture to remember that Hollywood is based on a lot of demonic rituals. There are people who practice all kinds of black magic and devil worship there, and somewhere along the line, we would just have to add in human sacrifice. All right, so two powerfully elite groups that would be able to cover up and keep information away from cases of missing people. Now, the last thing that I want to say is when we're talking about what we call the usual suspects, we've talked about maybe the global elites. We've talked about Bigfoot. We've talked about possibly UFO connection. But is it a combination of maybe all three? Well, for the last example, I want to say there are a number of videos based on the Mount St. Helens eruption that people say that they were in the National Guard. Specifically, there was a guy in, I think, the Canadian Air Force that said he was stationed down here after the eruption of Mount St. Helens, and his job was to go around and pick up wounded Bigfoots, right? Wounded Bigfoots. And he is a pretty credible guy, and his story is very good. He said some of them were dead, some of them were very injured, and the injured ones they gave treatment to. So how does the government, who treats UFO or Bigfoots as UFO sightings, how is the government able to go out and find these Bigfoots in the forest? All right, so after all of that, here is what I think it is. Are you ready? Bigfoot is somehow associated with an intelligence that we don't have and we don't understand. They are able to manipulate sound, and they are able to manipulate the human mind through sound to get people to do things that they would not normally do. Now, where does this power come from? Is it from aliens? Is there an alien connection? Well, we don't know that, but what we do know is for some reason, George Lucas, a famous Freemason, saw it important that a Bigfoot was prevalent in all of the Star Wars movies, at least the ones that I've seen. So why would that be important? And why in the 1970s did the $6 million man encounter aliens and Bigfoot? And each time this Bigfoot is depicted as having super duper strength, which matches a lot of the disappearance cases where the body or the person is found miles and miles away, or completely mutilated, or animal carcasses completely torn to pieces by something of great strength. All right. So that is what I think it is. I don't think that it is any one thing. I think it is a combination of all three. I think the government knows about Bigfoot, and I think the government has some kind of an agreement to let them alone and to ridicule anybody who has anything to do with them. The same as with UFOs. And this is a government that goes into Bohemian Grove, and it's a Hollywood government, it's a corporation government. And basically what they're doing is providing a supermarket for Sasquatch. And they just don't want to tell anybody what's really going on. All right then, so this is Deceptions of the Ages News. We'll see you next time.